Okay guys, okay, so I'm over here at Lulu's garden, and I'm going to be hanging a hive trap in the tree right behind me. All I have with me is a little bit of wire, and I've got some wire snips, and that's all we need to hang the hive trap. So I'm gonna put this on the tree and get it secured, and then once it's hung and just kind of resting there, it's gonna free my hands up to be able to then run and grab a strap. And I'm gonna do 2 straps around the whole length of the tree to tie it on nice and tight so it doesn't wobble around in the wind. And then hopefully a native swarm will find that. I do have some attractants in there. I have yellow, lemongrass essential oil, and I forget what it's called, propolis, bee resin, that sort of deal. So that's going to be the next step. So I'm going to record this and as we go. You may or may not hear my kids playing or fighting in the background. That's just kind of the nature of the beast today. But we're going to go ahead and get this done. And I wanted to walk you through this process so that you could know how to do this for your own as well. And we'll try to make it short and sweet. So stay tuned. Okay, I got a little squirrel helping me out today. This tree right here is a beauty. Got a lot of turkey tail mushrooms growing on it. It's been dead for a while, and previous owners actually chopped it down and left the stump remaining. So it does have a bit of a hollow here. So maybe one day we'll see hive inside that hollow, but for now, they're gonna go into my hive trap because that's the way that I want it to be. So step 1, get our ladder out. So the rule of thumb with your hive traps is you want them to be about 10 feet off the ground. Personally, I want it to be, you gotta be between 10 and 15. You gotta be about 10 to 15 feet off the ground. Between there, 10 and 15 feet. If you're any further away than that, it might give you some grief. So mostly because the bees prefer to be over 10 feet, and they will actually measure. They do this little spiral down to the ground and then shoot back up, and then spiral down again and then shoot back up. It's really cool. They're very intelligent. Okay, so some quick pointers before we dive into this. The first thing you need to know when you're hanging your hive trap is it needs to be about 10 feet off the ground. Between 10 and 15 feet is where you want the trap to sit. I picked this tree because it's been dead for a long time. It's just full of life, and it's surrounded by pollinators, pollinator species plants. Here in about a month, this area just gets blows up with green. Lots of flowers on some mulberries and some honeysuckles and variety of other pollinating plants, such as this black cherry tree I have sitting beside it here. And then right underneath the camera here, I've got some other flowers and things. And so lots of good pollination here. The other element of choice and why I chose this tree specifically is because it gets a little bit of afternoon shade. And you don't want to, especially in my climate where it can get so hot, you don't want to boil out your bees, and they like to have a little bit of afternoon shade and some morning sun. Especially in the winter, that morning sun is really important. So all those things being said, we'll hang it up on the tree. For this particular tree, it's so big. This is an ancient tree, huge, and real sad that the previous owners of the property cut this down. It was a gem. But here it stands for another purpose. So what I'm going to do now is I happen to have extremely and excessively long screws, which is a really bad idea if this is your tree. But because this is dead and I'm not worried about hurting this already dead tree, I'm going to go ahead and use this. For your case, you'll want to use nails. Like a 4-inch nail would be perfectly fine. You only need it to stick out just long enough for you to grab it. The problem with using nails, especially if it's a live tree, is you're going to, one, hurt the tree, potentially give an access point for insects that can then later kill the tree. Or two, in about 2 years, you have to replace that nail because the resins and the movement of chemicals inside the trees will actually decay and erode the steel nails, the hardened nails. It's incredible what nature can do. And then when you go to hang your trap on it in 2 years, it'll just snap right off and your trap will fall to the ground. So don't rely on this. It's just to hold it there while you use your regular ratchet straps around the length of the tree. Okay, so I've got my tape measure here too, and what I'm going to do is I measured my hive. My hive trap sits about 20 inches, and so I'm going to measure from the ground up to 10 feet exactly, and then I'm going to go 20 more inches because the top of the trap needs to sit at the top of this because the access for it is about right on the 10-foot mark, and a foot above is totally fine. You just want to be between 10 and 15 feet. So let me climb up here. And I can already tell you I am above 10 feet, but that's going to be fine for our purposes today. So right here, I'm about 11. Whoops. Wow, look at all that turkey tail mushroom on this tree. That's gorgeous. All right, so we're about 12 feet where I want it, and about 14. Okay, perfect. So where I have it now is I wanted it to sit in this nice little flat pocket right here where it has a little bit of a flat on the side of the tree, which allows it to sit nice and tight, so any kind of crazy wind that comes through here isn't going to rattle it too hard. So I need to go about 20 inches so that I can cover the full length of the hive here. And decide the bottom. It's going to be about right there. And then I can grab my trusty drill, go up to about the top point, and I should be using nails, but we're going to drill this in. Okay, so now that I've done that, I already have some wire up here. So what I'm going to do is grab my snips and I'm going to take a little bit of that wire and I'm just going to wrap it around the nail a few times as extra insurance when I bring up the hive and it's got its own wire wrapped around its lid as well. And I want that all to sit right at the edge of the nail. There we go. Okay. All right, now I'm leaving a little bit of a slack here so that I can make a sort of J hook out of it. And then I'm just going to snip off the excess there. Now, when I bring up my hive, I will have wire wrapped around the lid of the hive, and the hive will be able to come up, and the wire wrapped around that will then seat around that nail in the J hook that I just created, and I'll wrap it around a few times, and then as long as I don't fall off the ladder, then that should sit there long enough for me to get the ratchet straps and tie it around the tree. I've got this tangled mess of wire around my feet here, and I slinkied down from the top of the tree. It's actually not that tangled, it just looks like it. And what I'm going to do is right here around the base of the hive trap, so here's the hive access, right? That's where the bees come in and out. Right here is a nice firm hold. So I have the ability then to wrap right underneath it, all the way around. And I need to choose, so when your bees come in and out of that access point, so you need to direct that in the direction that you intend the bees to come and go. Personally, I would like that to be south facing. And so I'm going to ensure that when I hang it, it goes on the tree like this. So they have access from the top of the tree over the honeysuckles that are all sprouting and giving them good nectar, and then kind of working in sync that way with the sun as well to keep them warm. So now coming in here, I'm going to just tie that around a couple times. And then I'm going to create a little bit of a loop here, tie that around a couple times, twist it, and then just because I don't like getting stabbed, I'm going to snip off the excess as well. So now I might twist that up just a little bit more here, make sure that it's nice and firm. And the intention here is that this little loop is going to go around my nail up at the top. And so now as I climb up there, I can just rest that right on it. Make sure that's a little bit more centered here. I can rest that like that on the nail, and that'll allow me to go and get my straps and be hands-free for a bit. I have this on the wrong side, so I'm going to either rotate it. I'll just take it off. So I'm just going to rotate that and make sure that your wife is with you when you do this, so you don't mess up. Oh, and while I've got it upside down like this, right here is something good that you should be aware of. So this, at the bottom of your hive trap, you should have some ventilation. The bees will choose where they want the ventilation and where they don't. They're really good at seaming the cracks and sealing off their enclosure to the size and the specifications that they desire. What's good space requirements for them to insulate and keep warm, and so on and so forth. And then as this hive gets bigger in here, as a colony gets bigger, and you have about 6 weeks, give or take, that I'll be leaving my hive in this after I see activity in it. That will give them long enough to fill the honeycomb on these frames, and then they'll be able to create enough of a foundation, a wax foundation on these foundationless frames, that I can then pull them out of here and transfer them into our horizontal hive that will then be placed directly underneath the tree. And it's really important that when you're doing your transfer from your hive trap to your horizontal trap, actual hive, permanent hive, that you keep it directly underneath the tree. If you're going to move it so that you have another location in mind, say on the other side of the property here, it's too close to where your previous was, and bees almost geolocate. It's really interesting. So if I take that hive or take the trap down and I put them in a hive, and then I move the hive to the other side of the property, all of those bees that go out hunting for pollen and nectar will actually come back to the exact same spot that this hive trap was, and they'll be lost. They will never find the hive. So you'll lose your swarm. So it's really important that you follow nature's protocol. Typically, when a colony finds a hollow in a tree, they'll go to that spot, they'll have that hollow, and then sometimes the trees will fall over in nature, and that's just something that they're prepared for. So when that tree falls over, they have that distance, 10 feet, 12 feet, maybe 15 feet from the trunk of the tree around in a circle, that they'll scout looking for their hive, and they can find that. So if you have your swarm trap in the tree and you want to relocate them into your permanent trap or permanent hive, you bring it straight down into your permanent hive. Don't move it further than the 10 foot mark away from that location. If you need to, say you have another location, this isn't going to work for you in your property, then you need to catch your swarm off of your land. And then take it a few miles out, so that when you bring them back here, you can keep them in that location. And they have to kind of reset that geo location system that they have. However they mathematically do that, I don't know. But that allows them to do their reset, and then they'll be able to come and go from that new hive and that new location on your personal yard. Okay, so one more quick thing. I am a really active gardener. I really love to build. And when I start creating a space, I put a ton of effort into it. I really overwhelmingly work out. That's kind of the system. I go and I hand shovel things, and I dig up, and everything by hand, unless I've got the option of using something more easy like a skid steer or a bucket or something that can ease it. but I'm willing to put in that work in the front, in the beginning. But the reason I do that in the beginning is to create sustainable ecosystems, so that the designs that I'm creating mimic nature, so that I don't ever have to do that again. Because ultimately the goal is not to break your back every time you have to go out into your garden, right? And so I want to pose this philosophy, right? Create something, put the work in the beginning, create something sustainable, and then let it be sustainable. Let it be regenerative and have not a net zero, but a net positive output as you're moving forward. So that being said, the term lazy gardener does not apply to me, but the intention of being a lazy gardener in peace and just joy of your space that you created absolutely does. So now that you have that little background of my philosophy and how I do things in my yard and why I choose food forests over typical agricultural models, let me explain what I just did. I turned that thing around again. So put some thought into this, because I obviously didn't put enough thought into this. I now chose, as I was sitting up here, I was about to hang it, I wanted my hive to look this way now instead of that way. The reason being, yes, they have less pollination on this side, and it would be nice if they could fly right into the honeysuckle, but I want to be able to stand in my yard, put my binoculars on, and see the hive activity right in the front of my hive. I don't want to have to kind of fuss and fight over coming all the way out here and leaning around the honeysuckle to see the front of the hive and make sure that I have a healthy colony. I can just lean right out my kitchen window and, oh, there they are. And that's awesome to me. So that being the case, I'll know when my hive trap has caught something. I'll know when the hive is starting to grow, and with enough prayer, it'll be a nice healthy colony in here, and it will be easy for me and less strenuous for me to understand what's happening with my colony. So let's get this thing up here. Please, if you're doing this yourself, you either use somebody nice and agile or be careful. So I happen to have placed a really nice little branch at the base, or I found a placement that has a nice little branch that I can kind of rest this on as I'm getting up to the top of the ladder here. And then I have that loop that I can then set this right on, give it a good bounce, make sure it's not going to fall as you walk away. And there we go. Easy peasy. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to get the straps. I'll strap it around a couple times, make sure it's nice and secure, open up the door, and it should be solid in there. I might replenish a little bit of the lemongrass essential oil to make sure that the attractants are still good in there. And then we're getting right into swarm season, so we should have a swarm here very soon. Ready? Okay, so I have an Epic GoPro. I'm going to show you the view from up there. And I also have 2 straps with me. You need 2 straps, okay? So here's the deal. If you don't have camo, they're not as cool as these ones. No, but in reality, camo is awesome. I recommend you use camo because camo is cool. Here we go. Oh, I dropped that GoPro. I'm going to have to show you later. Okay, so this is a little tricky because this section of the process requires typically throwing this around the tree. And if it were a smaller tree, this wouldn't be a problem, but this is a massive tree. So you might watch me struggle for this for a minute here. And there happens to be another tree right behind me here. So I might not be able to do this very effectively. Get a swarm trap, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Okay, so now that I fought with that for long enough, I figured out how to do it. I went ahead and selected a branch on the other side of the tree that has been chopped off. And then I hooked it onto this side here onto another branch. Since my tree is so large, it's actually going to take me 2 straps to get around this thing. So I hooked it around. Now it's sitting on the other side. So now I'm going to move my ladder to that side, climb up, and then reattach it. And then I'll throw my second strap around and catch onto this one, hopefully easy enough. And then that will allow me to then shimmy them up over the hive. Stop that video. Okay, I've gone ahead and looped that around another branch on the other side, so I'm just going to move my ladder back around and cinch it up. Okay, we've got our hive trap up there. I didn't end up doing my second strap because I actually don't have one long enough to go all the way around a second time, and I needed these 2 just to make this distance. This tree is so thick it would take 3 of me to wrap my arms around it, maybe 4. This was a really old tree. Kind of sad to see it down. But this is a good location. It's going to be covered with different vines. We're going to grow up it later for flowers, trumpet vines, things like that. And then behind us is this honeysuckle cove. And then this is right next to my garden. My garden is off to the side here, my primary garden. And then the food forest is being planted that direction around as well. So there's lots of pollination for the hive here. Once we, and the reason that it matters so much for me personally where I put my hive trap was because I'm actually just going to drop my hive right down to the bottom here. And this is going to be the placement for our actual full-time hive and colony. So here's your placement strategy if you choose to do what I did. The most effective thing to do, especially in the event that you are working alone, is to use that nail and the wire. That is really going to be your solve-all for being hands-free while you're trying to strap this thing up there. It's really dangerous to try to do this on your own with the straps and no method of securing it first. Many other people I've seen will build whole plateaus with just 2x4s and a piece of plywood, and they'll be able to just screw those in, and then they just bring their box up and set it right on top. Then they can anchor it down to that and they're good to go. The problem with doing that is that you rely so heavily on the screws or the nails, and both of those can decay and snap over a period of time. So I would suggest that if you're doing this, especially not in a live tree, you don't want to rely on those options that penetrate the bark, the trunk of the tree. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of tighten up that loose end of the second strap that I needed to secure the first one. The hive is nice and secure. It's not going anywhere, so I'm just going to open it up. And we're ready for a colony. Okay guys, so I've got the hive trap up in the tree. I've given you some pointers. The swarm trap here is kind of step one. We've got to get the hive right, or I mean the colony, right? And these native colonies are resilient. The reason we're using native colonies is because they're adapted to the local pollen, the local climate, the local diseases, the local pests, all the circumstances of the environment here locally. Those native swarms are adapted for. If we were to import European hives, for example, well, God didn't put European hives here. He didn't put European colonies here. He put our native varieties here and our native species. And so let's do things in the way that God has designed them and set them forth, and then grow our faith in understanding that His design and His application of nature and how these things were to come about is superior to what we might come in and change and throw our understanding in, right? His understanding is so much greater than ours. And so we have the opportunity by doing swarm traps to catch those local swarms and to apply whatever observation we may have to that process. Looking forward to connecting with you, and we'll talk soon.